Welcome back with a smiling face. Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The Shift of Shadows. Episode 2. Garrett's POV. I stormed past my parents and uncles and aunts. My vision was red, my mind hazy. Anger and confusion coursed through me at an alarming speed. The only thing that kept repeating in my mind was why. What had I done to deserve this? What kind of game was the goddess playing with me? Garrett, what happened? Aunt Thera called after me. I don't want to talk about it now. I replied gruffly. Son, if she's your mate, I said, I don't want to talk about it. I yelled at them. Every pair of eyes widened incredulously. Never in my life had I raised my voice to my parents, let alone my entire family. Violet joined the group, her face passive. Only she understood the turmoil going through me right now. Mom stepped forward, reaching for me. Okay. Just remember we are here if you want to. Dad shot her a look. Lily, don't. She turned to him. This is something he wants to work out for himself. It's his mate, and his choice. He didn't look very happy about it, but he didn't argue. Vi stepped around everyone, taking my arm. Come on. I let her pull me away and into the foyer, starting up the stairs. Everything in my body was urging me to turn around, to go claim Sophia, to hold her. But I couldn't. So what are you going to do? I gasped, looking around. Violet gave me a weird look, taking a step down towards me. Are you okay? She asked, her face worried. Then her face lit up, a smile taking over. Did you hear your wolf? Was that what that was? I reached out with my mind, calling. I'm here. Nice to meet you, Garrett. Despite the wave of emotions in me, I grinned. I got my wolf. I told my sister and she laughed happily. What's his name? Nice to meet you too. What's your name? I asked him eagerly. Hugo. I relayed the information to Violet. She opened her mouth to say something, but instead she gasped like I had. Her eyes became unfocused, staring into space. Then her face lit up with a huge grin of her own. My wolf's name is Hala. She exclaimed. Spirit and moonlight. We turned to see Mom, Dad, Uncle Ben, and Uncle Luke behind us. They were all smiling proudly. Is that what their names mean? Violet asked. Uncle Luke nodded. Hugo is derived from German origin, meaning bright of mind and spirit. Hala is of Arabic origin, meaning halo around the moon, or moonlight. Both beautiful names. I could feel Hugo's pride swelling up at his words. He was obviously proud of his name as well. We're going to bed. Let us know if you need anything. Mom said. She kissed our cheeks as she went by, Dad following behind. Uncle Ben wished us a happy birthday again before departing, but Uncle Luke leaned against the banister, staring between the two of us. Are you going to accept her? He asked bluntly. I don't know. I told him. Hugo whined in my head. You know that she is more than just your mate. She is the future Luna of the pack. Yes. His face grew serious. I don't know what happened between the two of you, but if you need to think carefully about your decision, Garrett. If you reject her, there is no guarantee of a second chance mate. You know as well as I do how rare those are. You would have to take a chosen mate, for the sake of the pack. But heed my advice now, not every woman is meant to be a leader. The goddess chose her for a reason. I didn't reply, and he knew I wasn't going to. My sister was silent behind me as well. Uncle Luke pressed a hand to my shoulder before going down to his floor. I thought over his words, not wanting to agree, but not denying that he was right. "Are you going to be okay tonight?" Violet asked. "Yeah. I just need some time to think." She finished for more. I nodded. "All right. I'm going to bed too. Come get me if you need anything." "Thanks." She left me standing there, once again lost in a crazy mess of thoughts. "You can talk to me," Hugo said. "I know what you want. I can feel it. I know what she did, Garrett. But you never did give her a chance to explain either." I snorted. "What is there to explain? She slept with another guy. She did acknowledge that she was in the wrong. Let's go back and talk to her." "No. Not tonight. You can't put it off forever. She's our mate." "I know. But with my shift being so close, I don't want to say something I'll regret. Afterwards, okay." He pondered for a minute before agreeing. "But we are going to talk to her," he said. "Yes. I am the future alpha, and I won't run away from my problems. I'm just putting it off until I have a clear head." "All right." I start walking again, my brain never stopping until I reached my room. I flopped onto my bed, rolling over and staring at the ceiling. "So, what do you look like?" I asked curiously. I could almost see his wolfish grin in my head. "You'll have to wait and see. You're not as big as my mom, are you?" "No." He barked a laugh. "As awesome as it would be, there is only one mother wolf in this family." Can you sense Sophia's wolf?" "A little. She has a strong aura, because she was meant to be a Luna. But she has not turned 18 yet, so I cannot talk to her." He sounded disappointed. "Her birthday is next month." "I know." "How did she know?" I wondered while I talking to him. She knew I was her mate, but she shouldn't have been able to sense it yet. Like I said, she is meant to be a Luna. Our Luna. Her senses are stronger than regular she-wolves. She doesn't feel the full mate bond, like you do, but she felt enough to know. I blinked. That was interesting. Then another thought came to me and I groaned loudly. In my head, Hugo yipped happily. Sophia would have to be with me tonight, during my shift. Unless trying to pull what your mother did. Hugo scoffed. Remember how that worked out for her? I shuddered, remembering how Mom told us about her first shift. Okay, so maybe having my mate there was better. Poor Violet. Unless she finds her mate by tonight, she'll have to do it alone. Hugo was silent, and I frowned. What? Do you know who her mate is? I asked. No. I can only sense our mate bond. He replied. But it felt like he wasn't telling me something, like he was holding something back. He sighed. All right. I don't know who her mate is, but I know she has one. She just doesn't know yet. How do you know? Because like you and Violet, Hala and I are also twins. I sat up, my mind whirring. But, that can't be right. Mom told us that the goddess gave one of us a wolf who needed a second chance. She never told us whose wolf that was. Only that she was looking forward to seeing her again, making me think it was Violet, as the wolf was female. And that means the goddess couldn't have blessed that wolf with a sibling. Hugo challenged. Oh. He laughed his barky laugh again. I rolled my eyes. Being twins, Hala and I have a stronger bond. I can sense that she has a mate, but I can't sense who it is. So if Violet has a mate, and she doesn't know who it is yet. I thought it through, my eyebrows scrunching together. That means that someone knows Violet is their mate, and hasn't told her? Why? I was wondering that too. But I have no answers. You humans think very oddly at times. I laughed, not even able to disagree. There were some pretty odd ducks in the world. We talked the rest of the night, getting to know each other. Rather, I learned about him. He was privy to all my memories already, having been with me throughout my life, just dormant until now. It was beyond nice having someone to talk to, someone I knew I could trust without a doubt in the world. Up until now, that person for me had been my sister, and even still, there were things she didn't know. Hugo knew everything about me, and I felt whole having him here with me finally. Light shone through me window as the sun peeked over the treetops. My body was full of energy, and I was also starving, despite everything I'd eaten hours before. I got up, going to the bathroom for a quick shower. Afterwards, I changed my clothes and went to meet my parents for breakfast. Violet was standing outside her door, waiting for me. "Hey! Get any sleep?" I asked. She had light bruises under her eyes. "None." "You?" "Same." Our parents eyed us as we joined them, and I apologized for my outburst the night before, assuring them I was fine, but I still didn't want to talk. They respectfully agreed and we had breakfast. Thank the goddess Mom made extra. I loaded my plate, barely fitting everything on, while Vi nibbled on a sole piece of toast and a glass of orange juice. "Violet." She looked up at our dad as she chewed. "I just want to remind you that we will be there tonight. Just in case." She smiled at him, but even I could tell she was nervous. "Thanks, Dad." I almost told her. But somehow, I knew that would only increase her anxiety. I thought again about who her mate could be, Jasper's face coming to mind. It would be just like him to not tell her they were mates. Hugo was silent in my head as I thought about this, and suddenly, I was just as anxious as my sister. Jasper's POV. I stood on the dock, watching the fish swimming carelessly below the surface of the water. Their bodies twisted gracefully around each other, and I wondered what it would be like to live in their world. My eyes caught a streak of orange, and followed the huge koi enter the swarm. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out the fish food I always brought and tossed some in. Instantly, every fish swam to the surface, their little mouths gobbling the treat. I smiled. This was my favorite place. Mainly because it was private, and nobody ever really came here. Years ago, I'd stumbled onto an abandoned cabin in the woods, only to learn later that it was just outside Blood Moon Pack lines. It was run down when I found out, the windows broken, the log siding overgrown with vines and the land with weeds and grass. The roof had holes, and the inside was a mess. The pond that was nestled to the side had a broken, unsturdy dock that was half swallowed by the water. It took me years to fix the place up. Sometimes my dad would come and help, after he followed me one day to see where I kept disappearing to. Now I had my own little getaway, one I no longer feared would come down on top of me. Sometimes I would come by and find a rogue or two, but I never kicked them out, and they never stayed anyways. Rogues had a habit of always being on the move, especially when they were close to a pack. Only once it turned into a fight, and thank goddess Dad was here that day, or it might have ended differently. In the end, we ran him off. I sat on the edge of the wood, my bare feet dipping into the coolness below me. My eyes reflected in the water, and for the millionth time I thought about them. My mother had brown eyes, chocolate brown. She always told me I had my dad's eyes, my real dad. And that I should be proud of them. But how could I be? The man didn't even acknowledge my existence. I wasn't proud to have anything of his, even his eye color. Still, the silver in them was unusual. Like metal gleaming on a knife in the moonlight. Mom, my adoptive mom, said it was my eyes that drew the girls to me. Maybe that was true, but I didn't care. I had no interest in any of them, save for one. Violet. Her face flashed in my mind, and I watched the smile grow in my reflection. Now her eyes, a blind man could get lost in them. I know I did. Often. She was the definition of beauty, with her long black hair and her creamy skin. Her attitude turned people off from her, but not me. She was strong, opinionated. Not afraid to call you out on your BT. Yet, she was kind, caring, the kind of person who would take a bullet for those she loved without thinking twice. And the amount of respect she held for herself was incredible, and still she gave the same respect to those around her. I'd never met anyone like her. I laid back, my face being warmed by the sun, and thought about the first time we'd met. I had just started school, the new kid in class. Everyone else had been there since kindergarten, all part of the pack, so I was especially the odd duck. A boy had taken my drawing, making fun of it. Looking back, he might have had a point. I couldn't draw worth, even now. Still, Violet had calmly gotten out of her seat, walked up to us, ripped the paper out of his hands and given it back to me before punching the kid in the face. I laughed as I remembered what she'd screamed at him afterwards. To this day, I have no idea where she heard that, or if she just made it up. But it made me smile every time I thought about it. After that, we never really became friends, being the introverted kid that I was. But I was nice to her, and her to me. I greeted her every day, always excited to see her. As we got older, I started seeing her in a different way. I started seeing every girl in a different way. The glories of puberty had me noticing all sorts of things about the opposite sex that I never paid attention to before. And apparently, they started noticing me too. Too scared to ask out the girl I really liked, I started dating Melissa Smith, who turned out to my first kiss. Then Rebecca Lang, my first time getting to second base. Then Shelby Hughes, my first time. By that time, the rumors about me were notorious. I don't think she even realized I was still a virgin. But I never could stop myself from thinking about Violet. Even after the greetings stopped, and we were no longer nice to each other, she was still the most beautiful girl to me, outshining all the others. I checked my phone. About 4 hours until the ceremony started. I'd been out here all day. Sitting up, I threw the rest of the fish food into the pond before getting to my feet and locating my shoes. My hands trembled slightly, the anxiety taking over again. I closed my eyes, focusing on my breathing. Everything is fine. It's going to be fine. I repeated it over and over until I was calm. I could feel my body was getting ready for tonight. And once again, I felt a pang of longing. How I wished my mother could be tonight, encouraging me. But I assured myself she would be, from the goddess's realm. It wasn't exactly the same, but it was enough. I ran all the way home, about 45 minutes. I was pretty proud of that. I trained hard, and still held the record for being the fastest of my group. I slowed to a walk when I got to my street, seeing my little sister Elena playing in the front yard. "Hey Squirt! Jasper's home!" she yelled. I held out my arms, and she launched herself into them giggling. Where did you go? Out for a run. Because you're shifting tonight? Yup. She squealed. I can't wait. I set her down on her feet and she took my hand. Even though Elena was my adoptive sibling, I loved her like my own flesh and blood. She was an adorable 5-year-old, with a sharp mind about her. She'd already skipped a grade, and was reading at a 6th grade level. I was immensely proud of her. You know you can't come, Elena. You'll be in bed, and the shift gets a little scary. I told her. She gave me her most serious face. I'm not scared. I'll be the toughest she-wolf ever when I shift. You won't hear me make a sound. I chuckled. Wanna bet? How much you got? I'll bet $100 that you cry in the first 10 minutes. She stuck out her hand. Deal. You better have my money. We shook and I laughed. What have I told you about gambling, Elena? Mom came down the front steps shaking her head. And you shouldn't be encouraging her. She said to me. I held up my hands. I promise I'll put her in rehab if she becomes addicted. Mom sighed. What are you betting on anyways? Whether or not she'll scream during her first shift. I won't. Declared Elena. Mom looked at her with wide eyes before turning back to me. Put me in for 50. She said in a low voice. Elena's jaw dropped and I laughed hard. Vicky is on her way. Dad said as he came out the door. Elena pouted. Do I have to stay with Aunt Vicky? Yes. Dad said. But she smells like vinegar. All the time. She complained. Elena. Don't be mean. Mom scolded. I bent down and pulled her in for a hug. I promise I'll shift for you tomorrow so you can meet my wolf. Okay. Fine. Aunt Vicky's blue sedan pulled up, parking on the curb. The strong scent of vinegar hit my nostrils as she got out and Dad and I shared an amused look. Aunt Vicky cleaned houses for a living, and she always used HOME0MADE cleaning products. Sadly, most of them were vinegar-based. Elena scrunched her nose up as Vicky gave her a big hug. Then she turned to me. Good luck tonight, Jasper. I'll be rooting for you. Thanks. I gave her a smile. All right guys, let's go. Mom clapped her hands together. Vicky, I left some money on the counter for pizza. You know her schedule. Thanks, Linda. Elena gave us all a sour look as she led her into the house. We didn't live that far from the pack house, so we decided to walk, and I was grateful. I was just coursing with adrenaline. Dad threw his arm over my shoulder, giving me a squeeze. You ready? He asked. I chuckled. Nope. You'll do just fine. Mom said on the other side of me. I stopped on the sidewalk, making them stop as well. Listen. I rubbed the back of my neck awkwardly. I just wanted to say thanks to you guys. For everything. Taking me in, helping me with school. Giving me a family, you know? I know I'm not always easy to deal with, but I love you guys. And I'm really grateful that people like you are by my side tonight. I looked at the ground, crossing my arms. It wasn't easy for me to say all that, but I wanted them to know. Suddenly, a pair of arms went around me, and then another. We stood on the sidewalk in a mini group hug, and when Mom pulled back, she had tears in her eyes. You don't have to thank us, sweetheart. When Luna Lily brought you to us, we knew you would just bring more love into our house. And ever since Elena's been born, you've been the best big brother. You complete our family, and we couldn't imagine it without you. We love you too, son. So much. Dad added with a smile. I returned it. Come on. Together, we walked down the street. If they thought my rare admission of feelings was surprising, they were going to be really surprised later. Violet's POV. I stood in front of my mirror, finally finished getting ready. It was 11 already, and I couldn't be more disappointed or scared. All day I'd looked for my mate. I went to every store, every restaurant, every park. And nothing. I even went to the cemetery, only to find the old groundskeeper. That was probably the most productive part of my day. I went to say hi to my grandma and grandpa, Dad's parents who had died before I was born. I stopped by Greta's grave, updating her on everything. I still missed her cookies, she made the best ones, always sneaking Garrett and I extras when our parents weren't looking. As it neared 9 though, I finally just accepted that I was going through this by myself. I tried to comfort myself with the knowledge that lots of people did, people who didn't find their mates before their first shift. And they made it through. I kept telling myself this, but the knot in my stomach only grew more intense as the time went by. Trying to ignore it, I grabbed the white dress from my bed and left my room. Garrett stood on the other side of the hall, leaning against the wall. Ready? As I'll ever be, I said. We walked down the stairs together, saying few words. I turned the fabric over in my hands over and over again. Garrett held a white shirt and pants. Our clothes would be destroyed when we shifted, but we got pure white garments to put on after we shifted back, as was tradition. For this reason, I chose a plain black tank top, one of many I owned, and a pair of jean shorts that I didn't really care about. Garrett was dressed similar, in a plain blue t-shirt and old jeans, and both of us had bare feet. At the bottom of the stairs were our parents and family, and to my surprise, Sophia. She gave Garrett a small smile, which he returned with a nod. Are you two ready? Mom asked us. We nodded. All right. Let's go. My brother and I walked behind everyone else out of the house and across the yard. My hands started to shake as we got closer and closer to the training yard, where the ceremony was being held. Hey! Garrett whispered. Yeah. I'll be right there with you. His words calmed me some. I gave a low laugh. Thanks. But I think you'll be too busy with your own shift to worry about me. His eyes landed on Sophia, and he nodded slowly. Hugo told me that our wolves are twins too. He said. I know. Hala told me as well. Pretty cool, right? Totally. I knew he was trying to distract me. Unfortunately, it wasn't working. I kept looking around, hoping my mate would pop out of the night. I really didn't want to do this alone. My hope deflated when we reached the training yard, my face ashen. String lights had been set up, illuminating the area dimly. A low platform had been placed on the grass, and I watched as my parents stepped onto it along with Uncle Ben and Luke and their mates. Garrett and I took our places in front of them, a good distance apart. To my right, Aunt Thera and Uncle Killian waved at me, both giving me sympathetic looks. I waved back shortly, looking around. Groups of people, friends and family, were gathered around to support the shifters tonight. I saw a lot of proud faces, and a lot of nervous ones too. Everyone here knew what we go through tonight. Thank you all for coming. My dad's voice boomed out over us. I focused on him. First, I would like to say how proud I am of my children. Violet and Garrett, you have both grown into incredible young adults, and it is a privilege to be here with you tonight. He smiled at us, and I forced a smile in return. My skin started to tingle, and I looked at my mom frantically. She checked the watch on her wrist and nodded at me. Hala. I'm right here, Violet. Hala, I don't think I can do this. We don't have a choice. The time is upon us. Let me welcome the rest of Blood Moon's shifters tonight. Dad said. I felt a slow burning start somewhere inside me. It was hard to pinpoint exactly where it came from as it was moving steadily. The tingling turned into a painful itching sensation and I dropped to my knees, trying to prepare. You'll help me? I asked my wolf. I will. When the first bone snapped, I instantly started cussing my mate, whoever he was. All I had was my parents who watched over me worriedly, and my wolf to help guide me. But none of them could take away the pain. My stomach cramped, worse than any period I'd ever experienced. The cramp moved to every muscle in my being, and my vision blacked out for a second. Briefly, I glanced to my right. This might be the only time I was grateful for Sophia. Garrett was doing much better than I was, clinging onto his mate while his bones broke. Every so often he would twitch, while agonizing shrieks were coming from me. Our eyes met, his full of fear for me. The pain then intensified, and I fell onto my side, screaming. Tears streamed down my face and I begged and cried for someone, anyone, to make it stop. Through my blurry vision, I saw my mom jump off the platform, coming for me. And then she stopped, a confused look coming over her face. My legs snapped loudly, crunching and reforming. I opened my mouth to scream, only to realize it hadn't hurt. Raising my head, I saw a hand placed on my bare waist where my shirt had ridden up. My eyes followed it, down the toned arm, the broad shoulder and landed on Jasper's pained face. Mate! He breathed. Distantly, I heard both of my parents gasp, and a vicious snarl beside me. All of that was background noise though, as I stared into his eyes. The pull I felt for him and the way Hala was howling in my head, I couldn't deny it. Jasper Cole was my mate. And right now I didn't give a st if he was a man whore. I didn't care if he'd slept with 10 million women. I clutched his hand for dear life, pulling him closer. He pulled me into a sitting position, my cheek resting against his chest. His bare chest. Mate! I sighed. His arms held me tighter at the word, his lips connecting with my shoulder. Fur sprouted from my arms, my teeth growing and becoming sharper. Slowly, we repositioned ourselves so we still had physical contact, but as to not hurt each other when we completed the shift. Let go of him, Violet. Hala said in my mind. Let go. Now. I did as she demanded, pushing Jasper away from me. The pain peaked, and once again I opened my mouth to scream. However, what came out was a howl instead. The pain disappeared, leaving me exhausted and honestly, thirsty. But I'd shifted. The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes was a long snout and a black nose. Jasper's wolf stood over me, whining quietly, and sniffing me. I stood on slightly shaky legs, letting him know I was fine. He rubbed his face against mine, and Hala purred happily. Violet! I turned to my mom, shocked that I had to look down at her. I was at least 1.5 feet taller than her in my wolf form. Was I as big as my dad? Bigger? Mom smiled up at me as if she could read my thoughts. You're bigger than your dad. But still not as big as me. She laughed. Lily. We turned to the platform, where everyone was gaping at me. Mom turned back, her eyes roaming over me until her hands covered her mouth. What on earth? She gasped. What? Are we missing a leg or something? You're so silly. Hala shook her head at my stupidity. What does it mean? Mom was looking at Uncle Luke, who was staring at me. He shook his head. I don't know. Vi. I yipped as Jasper's voice entered my head. I forgot I could mind link now. I turned my eyes on him. His wolf was beautiful. He was almost as big as I was, his fur black as night. His eyes glowed silver, even more in this form than when he was human. You're my mate? Why didn't you tell me? I asked him. I'll explain later. But Vi, you need to look at yourself. Why? What's wrong with me? He shook his big head. Nothing. You're stunning. But you need to see this. Another wolf nudged my side. I looked into his eyes, shocked to see they were also silver. Unlike Jasper's though, they literally glowed. It was such an intense color, they almost looked white. His fur was red, bright red. He stood at my height, eye to eye. Garrett? I asked in disbelief. You okay? He replied. He gave Jasper's wolf a look, and I wasn't sure in this form, but I thought it was a dirty one. I'm fine. You? Hugo is beautiful. I'm good. And you should talk. Come on. We looked at our parents, who nodded and shifted. Mom stood towering over us, her wolf eye coming over to scent us. Hala yipped happily, trying to nip at her ear. Dad stood off to the side, obviously pouting. I gave a throaty wolf laugh as I realized he was indeed the smallest one out of us. What a blow to his ego. Nonetheless, our wolves went over to greet him as well. Garrett tilted his head, and we headed off into the forest. The rest of the shifters joined us for their first run, and it was amazing. I was seeing the woods I loved so much through new eyes tonight, my senses sharper. We stopped at the nearby lake, some of the wolves jumping in and starting to play. Come here, Violet. Mom mind-linked me. I padded over to where her, Dad and my brother were standing by the water's edge. Jasper followed behind me. I looked into the water, and started. I was completely black. That wasn't normal, not for a she-wolf. As a rule, only alphas we all black, right? But then, I looked at my brother. Why was he red? He was taking over as alpha, not me. Even weirder, why was Jasper's wolf black? Wasn't his mother a rogue? Look at your side. And your eyes. Dad said to me. Inspecting my reflection again, I got my second shock. My left eye was blue as Grandma Rose's were. My right was green, the same color as Mom's. But the most shocking thing was the fur on my side. Standing out against the black was white fur, perfectly shaped into a crescent moon, a half moon, a full moon, another half moon and another crescent moon. What is it? I asked Hala. A gift. Violet's POVY. I asked. I am a wolf reborn. I was given to you, being given a second chance. The goddess knows I will be treated right with you, Violet. This is her way of saying thank you for accepting me. But I didn't. Not that I wouldn't have, but my mom made the decision. You don't think you're worthy of a gift from the goddess? Not really. I admitted sadly. You're worth so much more than you give yourself credit for, Violet. What about Garrett? He's the future alpha. It should be him. Our brothers have their own gift. Together, they will make a worthwhile alpha. I stared at my reflection, unable to grasp the truth staring back at me. What are we? I asked. A midnight wolf. The first. I blinked. The first? You mean ever? Yes. I was distracted from totally freaking out by a flash of sparks on my shoulder. I looked into my mate's eyes, trying to focus. Hello, mate. That wasn't Jasper. Hello. Jasper's wolf. My name is Enno. Nice to meet you, Enno. Your name, it means protector, right? It does. Fitting, as I will always be here to protect you. Well, aren't you a charmer? He gave me a lopsided grin, his tongue flopping out of his mouth. Hala was itching to run with her mate, practically bouncing on her feet. I still had questions for him, but I pushed them aside for now. Letting my parents know, Hala guided me on how to give her control, and then they were off. I sat back in my own mind, watching as they took off into the forest, jumping playfully at each other. I laughed, as they seemed like two pups, but I could feel how happy Hala was. That's what mattered the most to me. After a while, they found a spot to lie down, snuggling close and sharing wolfy kisses. I was going to count that as her first kiss, and not mine. The sun was just starting to rise when we reached the training yard again. My dress was still in my spot, waiting for me. It seemed like we were the last ones back, and Jasper respectfully turned away as Hala helped me shift back. The morning air was cool as I donned the dress, turning my back now so Jasper could shift and get dressed. Once he was done, we stood on the grass, staring at each other. Why didn't you tell me? I demanded. I was still exhausted, and hungry, but I wanted answers. Because I didn't want you to go through your first shift alone. He replied. But I wouldn't have. I exclaimed. He shot me a look. If I had told you when I found out, would you have rejected me? I wanted to say no. But I couldn't. Because now I was in the same boat as Garrett. Jasper was the last person I expected to be my mate, and if I was being honest, I wasn't exactly jumping for joy. That's what I thought. He said. Like you said, females have it harder than males when it comes to the first shift. I didn't want you to go through that alone. And you're so stubborn, I knew you wouldn't see it that way. I am not stubborn. I snapped. So you're saying you kept it from me, for me? Yes. I scoffed. And did you consider the amount of anxiety I had to go through, believing I would have to do it alone? I did. Still better than actually doing it. I threw my hands up. Why? He threw at me. Because I was thinking about you? Your well-being? Geez, I'm sorry. His tone held heavy sarcasm. I crossed my arms, thinking. The last thing I wanted to do was reject him, but seriously? First Sophia, now Jasper? I know what you're thinking. I met his eyes. They were suddenly cold, angry. If you want to reject me, then just do it. I raised an eyebrow. You sound so sure that I will. I've kind of been expecting it. Wow, you think so much of me, don't you? He took 2 steps, planting himself in front of me. I craned my neck back to look into his eyes. I crossed my arms tighter, as the urge to be in his arms was almost overwhelming. How did he manage to stay away from me all this time? This was torture. You know what I think of you? He asked lowly. He continued before I could reply. I think you're the most beautiful girl I've ever met. I think you're smart and funny and strong. You're the most opinionated person I've ever met, and also the kindest. But I also know what you think of me. So I'm not holding on to much hope for our bond. I hadn't expected any of that. It was the nicest thing anyone had ever said to me. The amount of women I began. Not as many as you think. He interrupted me roughly. You know what you've heard. But not the truth. I blinked. What? 3 people, Violet. 3. That's the amount of people I've slept with in my whole life. He glared at me. Anything else said is just a rumor. Then why not put a stop to them? I challenged. I was having a hard time accepting this. How I could trust he wasn't lying for my benefit. Because I don't care what people think about me. Except you. I shook my head, closing my eyes. How do I know you're not lying, Jasper? Do you want to me gather all the girls in the pack? Get them to tell you. That's ridiculous. How else am I supposed to convince you? Can't you just trust that I'm telling the truth? I searched his eyes, only finding sincerity. I bit my lip. It still bugs me that you've slept with other people. I said quietly. He sighed. I can't change my past, Vi. I'm sorry I didn't wait for you, but it's only you from now on. If your parents could move past it, why can't we? I raised my eyebrows at him, but I shouldn't have been surprised. Everyone knew my dad got around before he met my mom. It wasn't exactly a secret. But now, Mom was the only one he looked at. And they were happy. The role model couple I'd looked up to my entire life. Looking at it that way, and regretting not looking at it like this before, I realized he had a point. It was beyond stupid of me to think my mate would wait for me. It was unfair of me to have that expectation, when in fact, there was plenty about me that wasn't exactly perfect. I realized how childish I'd been acting on this point, so much, that my own mate feared I would reject him. I uncrossed my arms. Slowly, I wrapped them around his waist, giving him a small smile. Sparks erupted from our contact, and I couldn't get enough of the feeling. I'm sorry, I said. Jasper stared down at me, his expression a mix between surprise and hope. You're not rejecting me? He asked. I shook my head. Not today anyways. I teased. His face lit up, taking my breath away. He looked so happy that I thought he would burst. His hands cupped my cheeks, hips facing coming down to mine. He stopped an inch from my lips. May I? Yes. I breathed. My eyes fluttered shut. His lips barely touched mine before a loud growl sounded beside us. I jumped, startled by the sudden intrusion, and Jasper straightened, keeping me in his arms. We both looked at Garrett, who was standing a few feet away. His hands were fists at his sides, and they were shaking. His face. I'd never seen him so angry, especially not towards me. He glared at us furiously, his chest vibrating with low growls. You accepted him. He spat at me. My mouth fell open at his tone. What is wrong with you? I asked. You can't accept him, Violet. Garrett. What's your problem, man? Jasper glared at my brother. You wouldn't even look at him if you knew what he did. At this point, I was getting irritated. What are you talking about? He pointed at Jasper, looking half crazy. He's the one. He's the one who slept with Sophia that night. For the second time in so many days, my heart dropped into my stomach. Jasper's POV. I felt Violet slipping out of my arms. I tightened my grip, not willing to let her go. What are you talking about? I spat at Garrett. I hadn't talked to Garrett much. Our confrontation a couple weeks ago was the most words spoken between the two of us probably ever. I never went out of my way to be his buddy, or even an acquaintance. Truthfully, the guy kind of annoyed me. But now he was trying to interfere between my mate and I? No. It was you. I looked down at Vi, who was staring at me with tears in her eyes. I couldn't tell if they were from anger or sadness, it looked like a mix of both. I don't know what he's talking about, Vi, I said. Liar! Garrett yelled. I saw you. Have you slept with so many girls that you don't even remember all of them? Jasper. Violet said lowly. Did you sleep with Sophia? Sophia Chong. My face paled as memories flashed. The party. I'd been upstairs, wondering why I even bothered to attend the stupid thing, when Sophia had entered the room. Oops. This isn't the bathroom, she said. I smirked. Nope, sorry. Jasper Cole right. The one and only. She giggled, dimples popping out on her cheeks. She was pretty, not Violet pretty, but passable. What are you doing up here by yourself? The party is downstairs, she said. I shrugged. I'm not really the social type. Oh, I know. I don't think I've ever heard you speak before now. She laughed again. Taking a seat on the bed next to me, she sighed heavily. Can I ask you something? She said randomly. Sure. Well, it's more of a confidence. Whatever. She started playing with a strand of her long hair. I'm worried, is X hard? I almost spit my beer as I laughed. She glared at me, and I tried to sober. Sorry. The way you phrased that. I chuckled. I don't really get what you're asking. She looked down at her hands. All of my friends have done it. And they talk about it. I can't imagine doing any of that. I'm scared I will disappoint my mate, when I find him. Oh. I thought about it. I don't think that possible. According to my parents, the love you have with your mate is unlike anything else. One can assume the physical love is the same. I took a swig of my drink. Suddenly, her hand was on my arm, her body turned towards me. Show me. This time, I did spit my drink. What? I sputtered. It won't mean anything. And it doesn't have to be intimate. I just want to learn something. Sophia, her lips were on mine before I finished. I almost pushed her back. But I didn't. I don't know why, but the next thing I knew, we were under the covers of Goddess knows whose bed when the door swung open. And Garrett walked in. I stared at my mate, pleading my eyes. But she knew. I'm positive my face gave it away. I swallowed, and answered her anyway. Yes. Her face clouded in disappointment and hurt. But I didn't know she had a boyfriend. She never told me that. I continued frantically. Nobody knew we were dating. Garrett said. I turned to him. Then whose fault is it really? Look, I'm sorry for my actions, but it should have been up to her to tell me if she was taken or not. Nothing would have happened if I'd known. He scoffed, but Violet looked back to me. She was biting her lip, the little quirk she had when she was thinking. I didn't know Violet. I swear. You can ask Sophia, she came on to me. A fist connected to my face, throwing me off guard and off balance. Instantly I released Violet so I wouldn't take her down with me. I hit the ground hard, my hand rubbing my jaw. Garrett! Violet yelled at him. Sophia would never. Garrett started screaming at me. But she did. Violet screamed back. Both of us looked at her in shock. Jasper's right, Garrett. It was her responsibility to tell him she was in a relationship. Are you serious right now? She probably did, and he manipulated her into doing it anyways. Violet's eyes sparked. Excuse me? Are you accusing him of forcing her? He glanced at me, a nasty smirk on his face. I wouldn't put it past him. 2 seconds later, Garrett was holding his cheek. He stared at his sister in complete and utter disbelief as she lowered her hand. Then she walked over to me, offering me her hand. I took it and she pulled me up. You slapped me. Garrett breathed. You're right, I did. She hissed. For him? He's lying to you, Violet. You can't accept him, he can't be your mate. He is. And I do. She looked at me. We have stuff to work out, obviously. But I will not reject my mate just because my brother doesn't like him. In case you haven't noticed, I'm not your mate's biggest fan. But I'm also not telling you to reject her. I'm leaving that choice up to you. She took my hand, pulling me past him. I just thought you had the same respect for me. Clearly, I was wrong. She said as we passed. We walked away, leaving him standing in the training yard. I clicked my jaw. Garrett had a good punch, that was for sure. I focused on my mate, trying to figure out what she was thinking. Her grip on my hand was tight, and her face was like stone. Now, more than ever before, I regretted my past actions. I was making a mess of things, not just our bond, but her relationship with her family. I looked away, startled that she'd dragged me to the pack house. Where are we going? I asked. My mom wants to meet you. She grumbled. Oh. We earned a lot of stares as we walked through the foyer and to the stairs. I'm sure we looked comical, but my stomach was twisting in knots. Had Garrett already told his parents? Was I about to get beat up from none other than the Alpha of Blood Moon? Well, I had a good run. Though maybe I could still run. Stop fidgeting. Violet sighed. They're not going to bite Jasper. Easy for you to say. I mumbled and she shot me an amused look. I'd obviously never been to the Alpha's floor. I looked around, admiring all the artwork as we walked. A particular piece caught my eye, but Vi pulled me along. I'd have to take a closer look later. We stopped in front of a door and she walked in without knocking. Slowly, I followed her, shutting the door behind me. Turning around, I was met with a smiling Luna and a passive Alpha. I gulped loudly, nodding my head respectfully. Alpha. Luna. Jasper. Luna Lily said. She came to stand in front of me, looking me over. I haven't seen you up close in a while. You sure have grown. Only a little. I replied sheepishly and she laughed. Come, sit. I made an early lunch. Thank you. I said. I took a seat next to Violet at the round table in the center of the room. The Luna had prepared all kinds of sandwiches, crackers and meats, cheeses, tea and juice, and some delicious-looking desserts. Feeling awkward, I took a sandwich and poured myself some orange juice. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. So. Alpha Dimitri began. You're Violet's mate. Yes, sir. He looked at her. And is this another case like Garrett's? She shook her head. No. So you accept him then? She looked at me with a small teasing smile. Most of him. All right. He looked at his mate and she nodded. Violet, come help me in the other room for a minute. Mom. Your dad would like to speak with Jasper. Did my soul just leave my body? Standing, Violet shot her dad a look, one I interpreted as "don't kill him." Or maybe that was just my wishful thinking. She glanced at me over her shoulder as her mom ushered her through a door near the kitchen, shutting it behind them. I stared at the plates of meats and cheeses, already sweating. "I've heard a lot about you, Jasper," Alpha Dimitri said. "I hear you're very good with the ladies." "Hardly, sir." "No." Daring to look up, I met his eyes. "Most of what people hear about me is rumors. I'm not perfect, but I'm definitely better than the Jasper everyone hears about." He raised one eyebrow, and I saw a lot of Violet in the action. "My daughter knows this. I've explained it to her, Alpha. Honestly, I wasn't expecting her to accept me as her mate. Being Alpha, I hear a lot that goes on in the pack. Not much escapes me." He picked up a spoon, twirling it in his fingers. "But I am happy to hear that most of it isn't true. You're very lucky to have my daughter as a mate." "I feel lucky. And I think she is also lucky to have you." I raised my eyebrows, surprised he would say that. A small smile played on his lips. "I pride myself in being a pretty good judge of character, Jasper. And I know your father well. I do not believe he would raise you to be the man I've heard so much about. As long as you treat me daughter with the respect and love she deserves, I am happy to accept you into my family." Tears brimmed my eyes. Partly from being grateful that I was still alive right now. But mostly from the knowledge that I'd gained such a respected father-in-law. Alpha Dimitri was a great man, and I looked up to him. "Thank you, Alpha," I replied lowly. Violet's POV. I bit my lip worriedly. I wasn't hearing any sounds of a fight, so I guess that was a good sign. Still, Dad was the Alpha. I doubted he didn't know about my mate's reputation. And being Alpha, he could also be pretty scary when he wanted to be. It would make a lousy first impression if Jasper himself. "Stop fretting," Mom said from across the room. "Your dad just wants to talk to him." "Talk to him, or interrogate him?" I asked. She smiled. "Well, maybe a bit of both." I groaned and she laughed. "You have nothing to worry about, Violet. Jasper is a good man. He has a bit of a reputation," I told her. "Oh, I know. But it's all rumors." I narrowed my eyes at her. "You sound very confident about that, Mom." Her cheeks turned light pink and my jaw dropped. "You didn't. You're my daughter. Of course I wanted to make sure he was suitable for you," she said defensively. I gaped at her, astonished she used her powers on my mate. How did he not feel it? Mom did it to me once, when she thought I'd partaken in weed. It hadn't hurt, but I definitely felt her aura. Over the years, she'd gained tremendous control over her gifts, able to use them without physical contact. "And you don't worry about your brother either. He will come around eventually," she said now. "Mom," I gasped. "Just how much did you see exactly?" "Only what I needed to. Jasper cares deeply about you, Violet." She frowned. "As much as I hate to say it, he is telling the truth about Sophia. But that's something Garrett and her need to work out, so don't feel guilty about it." "He was telling the truth?" I asked hopefully. She nodded. "People make mistakes. Goddess knows how many your dad made with me. But I wasn't perfect either. I'm proud that you chose to try and work through it with your mate." "Thanks, Mom." She smiled before her eyes glazed over. "They're done." I spun around, yanking open the door, my eyes immediately finding him. Jasper's face was flushed, and he looked a little emotional. I quickly took my seat next to him, reaching for his hand. The sparks from our contact made me smile. "Are you okay?" I asked. Dad snorted. "You make it seem like I'm a monster." "My monster." Mom leaned down and pecked him on the lips. "I'm good. We just talked." Jasper squeezed my hand. "And now I'd like to talk as a family," Dad said. He looked Jasper in the eye. "I'm very surprised about the color of your wolf." "I am too," Jasper admitted. "He won't tell you anything." "I've asked him. But I never met my dad, and my mom was a rogue. He wouldn't remember someone he's also never met," Mom said thoughtfully. "But we can recognize our kin. If you were to find your dad, your biological father, your wolf would know him." Jasper's hand tightened in mine, his jaw clenching. I knew exactly how he felt about his real dad, and just how eager he was to find him. "Not at all. You don't have to," I told him gently. "Actually," Dad said, "I think you do. It's not just your color that has me curious, but also your eyes." "My eyes? Only one family that I know of has your eye color, Jasper. It's uncommonly rare." "Which family?" Mom asked. Dad looked at Jasper as he spoke. "The Warwicks. Specifically Alpha Warwick and his son." My eyes widened, Jasper's mouth fell open and Mom gasped. You think I have alpha blood?" Jasper whispered. "I think so." Dad nodded. Jasper shook his head slowly. It wasn't hard to tell what he was thinking, you could almost see the words on his face. "It would also explain why you're Violet's mate," Dad continued. "She is the daughter of an alpha, and being mated to another alpha, even with a diluted bloodline." Dad. "No, he's right. My mom was a rogue," Jasper said. "Still." I gave Dad a dirty look. "You could word it a better way." By the look on Mom's face, I knew she agreed with me. "We don't know the situation," Mom said, still frowning at her mate. "Your mom may not have always been a rogue. Maybe she was forced to leave the pack." Jasper's nodded mutely. "So, this means I have to, what? Get a hold of this alpha." "Already done. I had my beta get a hold of him this morning. He's on his way here, and should be here by tomorrow." My heart squeezed. Jasper looked at me with wild eyes. "I'll be right here with you. I promise." I mind-linked him. "I don't know if I can do this, Vi." "You can. I know you can." We still had things to work on, that was for sure. But if there was anyone I trusted, it was my mom. If she said Jasper was a good guy, then I believed that heart and soul. He'd made mistakes. Mistakes that were causing drama between Garrett and I. But Mom was right about that too. Garrett needed to grow up, and let me live my own life. Whatever problems he had with Sophia, he needed to work out. Just like I did with Jasper. Until then, I would be here for him, while we figured this out. One step at a time. "Can my parents be there?" Jasper looked at my dad, who nodded. "You can tell them. Be here tomorrow around noon. We'll meet in the cafeteria." "We really need to set up a meeting place other than the cafeteria," Mom grumbled. "It's not very formal. Neither is the game room. Why don't we convert one of the free rooms?" I tuned them out while they debated. Jasper rubbed slow circles on my hand on the table, his eyes searching mine. "I'd like to meet your parents," I told him quietly. "They'd love to meet you." I smiled. Shall we? He glanced at Mom and Dee. Are we allowed to leave? I laughed and stood. I'm going to meet Jasper's folks. I'll be back later. Oh. All right. Mom barely dismissed me, she was so into her new renovation plans. I walked to the door, him trailing behind me, and saying an awkward thank you, to which Mom waved her hand at him. I snickered. Wow, they really get in deep when they talk. Yet. I think it's cute. I smiled. You ready to introduce your new girlfriend to your parents? He chuckled. Girlfriend? Is that not what I am? His arms went around my waist, he had to bend slightly to place them there, he was so tall. I was under the impression you were something more actually. Was that a roundabout proposal? Would you say yes if it was? I smacked his chest lightly. Too soon, buddy. Try again in a year or so. A smirk took over his face. I'll remember that. I have no doubt. We left the pack house, and I looked towards the trees. He seemed to have the same urge, so hand in hand, we headed that way. Once we were deep enough, I went behind a bush and stripped. The second shift was a million times easier, considering only hours before I'd been in the most pain of my life. It was still a little tense, but it felt more natural. I shook out my fur, coming out to find Enno sitting and waiting for me. Picking up my clothes with my teeth, I gave him the lead and took off after him. I didn't think I'd ever get tired of running through the woods in this form. I felt so free. The feeling of the dirt beneath my paws, and the wind coursing through my fur was indescribable. We ran east, occasionally brushing against one another. I took the time to look at Enno, really look at him. He was much bigger than a rogue, maybe even a few inches bigger than my dad. Even if Jasper's dad wasn't Alpha Warwick, he definitely didn't have a rogue for a father. I came to a stop when he did, and he pointed with his nose in the direction I assumed his house was. Finding a wide tree, I shifted back and got dressed. I walked back to him with a huge smile. I love running in Hallis form. I exhaled. I know what you mean. We shall go for a run, a real run, later. I know a place we can go. Okay. He took my hand and started leading me. I was suddenly nervous, but probably not as nervous as he had been meeting my parents. I still wanted to make a good impression though. We cut through the trees into a backyard. A playset was structured off to the side, complete with a swing set and a large apple tree nearby. A brick fire pit was dug into the ground, a metal grill placed over top. Beyond that laid wide flower beds, dancing with colors. I picked out 4 different types of flowers and several rose bushes, and still more species that I didn't know. Your mom likes to garden, hey? Oh yeah. She has a green thumb. She's done a great job. These beds are beautiful. Thank you very much. I looked up to see a woman coming out the back door. She had medium-length blonde hair, gentle blue eyes and a kind smile. Her build was slender, but fit, and she had a graceful walk, almost bordering on dancing. She was lovely, and I liked her immediately. You must be Jasper's mom. I held out my hand but she ignored it, pulling me in for a hug instead. I'm so happy to meet you. She gushed. Vi, this is my mom, Linda. Jasper said. You can call me Mrs. Cole for now, or Linda if you're comfortable, dear. I like Linda. I smiled shyly. She grinned. My husband is at work, but he will be home later this afternoon. You're welcome to come inside. Stay as long as you want. She seemed so happy to meet me, I couldn't say no. I followed her inside, and was instantly attacked. Hi! A little girl who resembled Linda a lot was stuck to me, hugging my legs tightly. I looked at Jasper and he laughed. This is my little sister, Elena. She's a little eccentric. Elena looked at me, and my heart melted. She was the most adorable girl ever, with her slightly chubby cheeks, dimples and big blue eyes. She was missing a top tooth, the gap showing as she grinned hugely at me. I'm the cool one, she stated, and I almost died. I can totally see that. I laughed. Jasper put a hand to his heart. You too wound me. Are you Jasper's mate? Elena asked me. Yeah. Her eyes lit up and she let go of me to hop around. I have a sister. A big sister. She squealed happily. Linda scooped her up and bopped her nose with her finger. Come on. I'll put out some snacks and we can all get to know each other a bit better. Dylan's POV. Babe, I'll be back later. Okay. Don't miss me too much. Impossible. I have Brienne a loving kiss, a tingle running down my spine. Who would have thought I would turn into such a mushy guy? This woman brought out the best in me, and apparently my best included this side. I love you. I told her. I love you too. Have fun. I kissed her cheek before finally making my way out the door. I was supposed to leave over an hour ago, but Brienne had other ideas. Fun ideas. Needless to say, I felt a whole lot lighter, and I was in one of a good mood. Whistling a random tune while I drove, I made my way to the pack house. I hadn't seen Garrett or Violet in a few weeks, too caught up in Brienne. I felt kinda guilty, so I set aside some time to spend with them today while Brienne was spending time with her sister. After the shifting ceremony, both of them had taken off pretty quickly, and I hadn't had a chance to congratulate them. I was ecstatic. Unnie was a great wolf, a deep brown. With my hopes of becoming a warrior someday soon, his color would make for excellent camouflage. Brienne loved him, and he enjoyed being around her too. I couldn't wait until her birthday next week. He was pretty eager to meet his other half, even if she wouldn't shift for another month. I pulled up to the pack house, my whistling cutting off as I jogged up the front steps. Nodding hello to some of the maids, I made my way to the stairs. Hello Dylan. I looked up to see Luna Lily coming down. I smiled cheerily. Hey Luna. How are you? I'm good. And you? How is your mate? I grinned and she smiled cheekily. She's amazing Luna. I've never been happier. I'm glad to hear it. Are you here to see Garrett? And Violet? I think Violet went out for a bit. But Garrett should be in his room. I nodded. Thanks Luna. Have a nice day. She clucked her tongue at me. No need for such formalities Dylan. You practically live here, or you did. Call me Lily. And have the alpha on my ass? No thanks. She continued to laugh as she passed by me. I took the steps two at a time, wondering if Garrett would put in an elevator when he was alpha. It seemed to be a continuous complaint around here. Reaching his floor, I skipped along the hallway, tapping 3 times on his door. Nobody answered. Had he gone out too? Garrett? I called. What? My smile faltered at his tone through the wood. Tentatively, I opened the door, peeking around and my eyes grew. The room looked like a tornado had passed through. The dresser against the wall had been taken apart, by force it looked like, clothes strewn everywhere. The bed had deep gouge marks in it, the springs showing. Every game he owned was broken, the discs smashed into tiny pieces on the floor, mixed in with the clothes. Even the walls had holes in them. And sitting in the middle of the coas was Garrett, glaring at me. "What happened in here?" I asked as I shut the door. "What does it look like?" He waved his arms around. I got angry. I pursed my lips. "And you thought destroying everything you own was going to make you feel better?" I kinda hoped, yet. I sat next to him, being careful of the broken disc shards. "What's wrong?" "Violet." He said her name like it was a curse word. My heart stuttered and my jaw fell open. I had never heard either one of the twins use that tone regarding the other. Honestly, it scared out of me. "What happened?" I demanded. "She found her mate," he snapped. My face morphed into confusion. I remembered someone being with Violet when she shifted, but he'd had his back to me. And I was too focused on my own shift to pay close enough attention. "Okay." Garrett slammed his fists down on the floor. "It's Jasper!" he shouted. He looked at me, and even though I was surprised, my face remained neutral. This seemed to aggravate him even more. "Jasper? Jasper Cole?" he said. "Yeah, I know who you meant. Aren't you upset?" I sighed. "Not really, dude. I mean, if I know I would have been a few weeks ago, if I hadn't found Brienne." I leaned against his bed. "I get why you're annoyed, but it's Vi's choice. I'm assuming she didn't reject him, since you're this upset. You don't know the half of it. So explain it to me then. Remember Sophia?" My nose scrunched up as I thought. "That girl you used to hang out with and fawn over." He launched into the story, giving me every detail, right up to earlier when Violet smacked him. He grew more and more upset as he talked, and by the end, he was breathing hard, his chest heaving up and down. "And now she's run off to spend the day with her precious mate," he sneered. "Can you believe that? Oh man, he was going to hate me right now. Actually, yeah I can." "What?" "Dude, I hate to say it, and you really don't want to hear it, but Vi's right." I shrugged. "Sophia should have told Jasper about you guys. And even though the guy is an ass, I doubt he would have forced her into anything." "Don't give me that look, Garrett. If you guys were that close, and that in love, she would have come running to you if something like that had happened to her." His shoulders dropped. He knew I was right, he knew Violet was right. He just didn't want to admit it. "Look," I said. "I'm sorry you're going through this. But honestly, I think you need to let it go." "How does Sophia feel about everything?" I asked. "I don't know. I haven't seen her since my shift." I punched him in the arm. "Seriously? You're giving Violet about her mate, and you haven't talked to yours? Man, you need to grow up." I stood, walking to the door. "Where are you going?" "Sorry, Garrett. But you need to figure out, and no offense, but you're not great company right now. Go find your mate, and stop being a baby." And I left. If I was anyone else, he would have probably beat out of me for talking to him that way. He was my future alpha after all. But even he needed to hear it. I ended up wandering aimlessly around town window shopping. I saw a few things I thought Brienne would like for her birthday, making a mental note. I walked for a couple hours, hoping Garrett took my advice and he was with Sophia right now. I had always been suspicious of their relationship, assuming they were at least fooling around. She must be really special to have him so worked up. Garrett was the most level-headed person I knew. "Dylan." I turned at the sound of my name, smiling when I saw Violet. She was sitting on someone's front yard with a kid, a blanket spread out under them. I crossed the street, waving. "Hey! What are you doing?" The kid she was with, a girl who was maybe 5 or 6 years old, looked over her shoulder at me. "We're having a picnic." "Day." She rolled her eyes and Violet chuckled. "What?" she said. I looked around. "I don't see any food." "It's an imaginary picnic," the girl said. She looked at Vi as if to say, "Who is this guy?" I pointed to her, a question on my face. Before she could answer, the front door opened and Jasper walked out, balancing 3 plates. He stopped when he saw me, his eyes narrowing a bit. "Hey!" I greeted him. "Hey! Jasper, you know Dylan, right?" Violet said. "Sort of." "Well, come join us, Dylan. The more the merrier." She made room for me on the blanket, and Jasper sighed, but didn't argue. He joined us, setting down the plates with actual sandwiches on them. "What do you say, Elena?" "Thank you." He smiled at her. She must be his sister. So. Violet tried to ease the tension. "How's Brienne?" "Good." "That's good." I glanced at Jasper, who was already eyeing me. I sighed, and so did Violet. "Elena, do you have any sidewalk chalk?" she asked. "I have lots." "Great. How about you go get it and we can draw together?" "Okay." She ran off into the house, leaving the 3 of us alone. "Okay," Violet said quickly. "I know you two don't necessarily like each other, but Dylan is my best guy friend. And his mate is my best girlfriend. So can we please try to get along?" she begged. I looked at Jasper. "I've got no issues. I mean, I did. But I'm over it. I'm not here to cause problems, man. I was just walking by when I saw Vi. And for the record, I'm sorry about a few weeks ago at school." He put down his sandwich. "Yeah, same. I'm not looking for a fight if you're not." "Not today." I grinned and he snorted. Elena came running back out, dumping a ton of chalk onto the walkway. Vi got up and they started outlining a picture. "You fish?" Jasper asked me randomly. "Sometimes. Haven't been in a while." He looked at Violet and his sister, giggling together. I can tell she doesn't want any more fighting. Especially with what happened with her brother. "You heard?" "Yeah, I saw him earlier. I told him to get over it." "Did you?" I shrugged one shoulder. No point in being annoyed off in the past. He looked at me for a couple minutes, seeming to come to a decision. "I'm taking Violet to a place I know later, in the woods. You wanna come? I've got some poles there, maybe if we catch something, we can make dinner." "That sounds cool. But only if I can bring Brienne." I reached over, stealing Vi's sandwich. "The girls haven't seen each other in a while." "Cool." Violet's POV: I had an amazing day with Jasper's family. His mom was super nice, and super funny. We talked for hours, with Elena sitting on my lap the majority of the time. Linda liked to write short stories in free time, and showed me some of her work. I had to admit, I was impressed. She was talented. She told me she was working on a series of children's books, some already published and sitting on Elena's bookshelf. Around 4, Jasper's dad came home, and he was equally as excited to meet me as his wife was. I liked him as much as her, with his strong, yet kind personality and his endless array of dad jokes that made Jasper groan. I was in love with this family, and I felt so grateful that they had taken him in. When Linda asked Jasper to run to the store around the corner, I gathered the courage to ask her about it. There was no question. She said. We were in the process of trying to adopt. We were told the chances of conceiving a pup of our own were very low, but we could keep trying. Your mom was so nice throughout our struggle, she was my doctor. And then one night, we got a call from her, asking us if we could come to the pack house. She said it was urgent, so we did. The last thing I expected was a little boy to be waiting there with her. She'd smiled, lost in the memory. He was covered in dirt, the poor thing, and he was exhausted. Your mom made sure he had plenty to eat, and a nice bed to sleep in. Then she asked us if we would be willing to take him in. We said yes. Of course, we had wanted a baby, but how could I say no? I knew from the second I saw him that I loved him. And he's been our son ever since. She laughed, the noise tinkling in the air. And then we got our miracle baby, Elena. At first I was worried how Jasper would take it, having a sibling. But I never had anything to worry about, he's always been there for her, always protecting her and looking after her. Her first word was Haspa, until she learned to pronounce his name. What made me love them more was the fact that they always encouraged Jasper to remember his birth mother. She'd told me they would sit down sometimes and ask him questions about her, and then always remind him to keep her memory close. They were truly rare people, and I felt lucky to be a part of their family now. It made me see a new side of Jasper, a side he kept hidden from people. The love and caring he showed his family was completely different than the sarcastic, sometimes I knew. And then Dylan had shown up, totally unexpectedly, and I feared there would be another spat like this morning with my brother. Much to my surprise, Jasper had invited him and Brienne to wherever we were going today, and I was thrilled. The best part was there wasn't any awkwardness between Dylan and I, we chatted like friends as we walked through the woods, as it always should have been. He held hands with his mate carelessly, a small smile on his lips that never left. Thanks for coming along. I'm glad Jasper invited you. I told them. We missed you, Vi, said Brienne. Sorry I've been missing in action that last little while. I understand. Don't worry. She smiled. We should make plans, just the two of us. We could go into the city and have a shopping day. That sounds awesome. How about Saturday? Perfect. I hope Garrett smartens up by then. Dylan grumbled. I'd hate to spend the day alone if you're out. My heart squeezed, my guts twisting. I shook my head, pushing my feelings down. I didn't like fighting with my brother, but he was the only one stubbornly holding on to something that everyone else had let go of. If he didn't find a way to move on soon, I'd have to get our parents involved. This anger of his was eating him from the inside out. It wasn't healthy. Dylan walked ahead of us, joining Jasper, and they started talking. Brienne sidled up next to me, giving me a look. So, you and Jasper, hey? Yeah, it seems so. And you're okay with it? With his, past. I looked at the back of my mate, catching him as he glanced back at me and smiled. I've learned recently that you shouldn't believe everything you hear. So, yes, I'm okay with it. I smiled. Have you guys done it yet? I almost tripped over a root at her words. What? No. We've only been mates for a day. She giggled. Doesn't matter. As soon as you left, Dylan and I did. On school grounds. Yup. She chirped. Man, can he ever? I covered my ears. Okay. I love you, but I do not need details about your life. She laughed, throwing her arm over my shoulder. Just wait, girl. Ex with your mate is unbelievable. I nodded, but I kind of had to agree. After all, I didn't have anything to compare it to. Jasper would be my first, and my only. Even if he was terrible, I wouldn't know the difference. Which made me wonder, how would I be for him? Stop worrying, Vi. I'm not. You're biting your lip. She pulled my lip out with her finger. It'll be fine. I lowered my voice, slowing my steps even more so the guys wouldn't hear us. Hopefully. But what if it's not? What if I'm terrible at it? I whispered to her anxiously. Just go with what feels right. And if anything makes you uncomfortable, tell him right away. Communication is key. But I'm sure he'll take it slow with you. The first time anyway. She smirked. How much, does it really hurt? Like, a lot. Not as much as you think. And definitely not as much as your shift. And it's temporary, it only lasts a minute. Okay. And how do I? What are you guys whispering about back there? Dylan called to us. Nothing. I squealed. I could tell my face was bright red, and both the boys looked between us before shrugging. Though I thought Jasper was hiding a smile. Well, here we are, he said. I looked around, my eyes finding the most adorable log cabin. The wood was red, with a black shingled roof. 2 windows faced us on this side, reflecting the sunlight, and I could see a little dock hanging over a large pond. A barbecue sat off to the side, along with an old-fashioned barrel filled with fishing rods. It was the picture of comfort, a forest getaway. I loved it. Wow! I said. I had no idea this was out here. Dylan added. I found out years ago. Dad helped me fix it up. It's actually just outside of pack borders, so be mindful of rogues. Jasper warned us. Brienne looked around cautiously. Do rogues come here often? Not really. How far back is the border? I asked. About 10 minutes. I nodded. I doubted rogues would come this close to the border. We were safe. I'll go set up the rods, Dylan said. Brienne went with him and I stopped beside Jasper, looking up at him. You come here a lot? Yeah. Mostly when I need to think, or I just want to be alone. It's nice, yeah. It's beautiful, I replied. I think your beauty only enhances what's here. I laughed, my cheeks turning pink. That was cheesy. But it made you smile. I'll count it as a win. I grinned up at him, shaking my head. Slowly, he took my hand, guiding me to the cabin. It was even bigger up close, and now I could see a small fire pit, with some previously burned wood inside. A push mower was tucked around the back, along with a meat smoker. Looking into one of the windows as we passed, I saw a nice modern fridge and stove, as well as a long island. A living area was beyond it, and I wondered if the whole place open concept. I don't have much here, yet, just the essentials. Jasper explained. Well, I think it's amazing, I said honestly. If you want, you can bring some stuff here. He rubbed the back of his neck. I mean, you can come here whenever you want, but bringing some clothes might be a good idea. Thank you. I will, definitely. He smiled, my heart fluttering. Dylan walked over to us, handing Jasper a rod before offering one to me. Brienne grabbed the sodas she'd bought for us out of her backpack, passing them out. Together, we sat on the dock, talking and laughing quietly as not to scare away the fish. I was positive I wouldn't be home anytime soon. I was about to call my mom when I realized I could mind link now. It was easy to forget, as I hadn't been doing it my whole life, but it sure was convenient. "Hey Mom!" I focused on her, reaching out with my mind. "Violet? What's up? I just wanted to let you know I won't be home for dinner. And probably not for a while after." She was silent for a minute before answering. "Okay. Where are you?" "I'm with Jasper, Dylan, and Brienne. We're at a cabin in the woods. It is outside of the pack, but only 10 minutes. I could feel her anxiety rising. I really thought we were past her freaking out. "Should I send some of the warriors?" "No, Mom, please." "Violet, I'm fine, Mom. Jasper's dad knows exactly where we are, and if I really need to, the border is 10 minutes away like I said. Can you just trust me? Please." I could almost hear her groan from here. "Fine. But I am sending an extra group to patrol the border where you are. They won't bug you though." I didn't argue, because I knew that's the best I was going to get. "Thank you, Mom. Are you spending the night?" I raised my eyebrows at her question. I hadn't thought about it, but probably not. "I thought you wanted me back by 11. "I would, but since with your Jasper I just thought you'd like to spend the night with him," she finished in a rush. I decided to be honest with her. "Mom, I'm not ready for that yet." "Okay. Well, if you come home, then all right. But if not, you'll be at the cabin? You won't go anywhere else without telling me?" "Yes. I promise." "Thank you. Have fun, dear." "Thanks. I will." I ended the link, breathing out a sigh. I had expected her to demand me home by my curfew, and not a minute late. But it seemed like she was easing up on me, a little bit. Admittedly, I did feel a little better about extra patrols. "I think we've caught enough," Jasper said then. "Well, Dylan and I have anyway." I looked in the bucket behind me, filled with 6 big fish. I stuck out my tongue at Jasper and he laughed. "Who wants to do the deed?" Dylan asked, nodding at the bucket. Brienne grimaced, and Jasper looked away. I sighed, and stood. Dylan helped me move the bucket off the dock and onto the grass before turning and leaving me. "Hey! Where are you going?" "I catch 'em, I don't kill 'em," he called over his shoulder. "You all are a bunch of wusses," I called back. Jasper brought me a knife and one by one, I cut off the heads of the fish, letting the blood drain onto the ground. He watched me work with a disgusted face. "How can you be disgusted by this, when you want to be a warrior? Killing rogues is a lot messy than this." I gestured to the blood-soaked ground. "That's different. If I kill a rogue, or anyone, it'll be a life or death situation. These fish aren't trying to kill me." "Then you should have thrown them back." "Little late for that now, I'll say." "You're silly, you know that." "Oh, am I?" I nodded as I sliced through the last fish. "You will catch them, but not kill them, but then you'll cook and eat them? It makes no sense." He shrugged nonchalantly. "I guess I am kind of silly." I giggled. He helped me carry the fish into the cabin where I put them in the sink to clean them. After that, I left him to work, as he appeared to be in the zone. I took the time to explore the cabin. The living area was cozy, with a nice big fireplace, reading chair, and sofa. I wandered down the little hallway, opening a door that led to a white-tiled bathroom and deep tub with a shower. I'd definitely have to make use of that tub later, it looked relaxing. There was a door that led to a room filled with some boxes of books and other various items. I assumed Jasper was using it as a storage room for now. The last room was the bedroom. A giant king-size bed sat in the middle of the room, with a deep red comforter pulled over. 4 pillows were lined up at the headboard, and cute, homemade-looking tables sat on either side with lamps on them. A long wooden dresser was placed to the side, and a bookshelf filled with books beside that. Standing in front of it, I examined the titles, recognizing some of my favorites. I picked one off the shelf, skimming through the pages, surprised at how worn the book was. "You like Eliot?" I turned to see Jasper leaning against the door frame. He was studying me carefully. "He's one of my favorite authors actually." I held up the book. "One of yours?" He nodded. "He's one of my favorites too. I've read that probably 20 times over." "You know how to read?" I asked in mock surprise. "Quite well actually." He responded anyway. He walked over, picking a book from over my head. "This is one of my favorites." He handed it to me. "The Philosophy of Aristotle by Renford Bambra." I gave him a skeptical look. "Seriously?" He leaned over, placing one arm above me on the shelf. His eyes never left mine, and my heartbeat was starting to pick up. "Want to know my favorite quote by him?" "Sure." "Love is composed of a single soul inhabiting 2 bodies." He recited and my breathing nearly stopped. Pretty accurate, don't you think? He took the book from me, tossing it onto the bed before placing his hand on my cheek. At this point, I didn't think I could answer him. "Can we try this kiss thing again?" he asked softly. I nodded mutely, excitement and nerves running through me. Jasper leaned in, and my eyes closed. When his lips touched mine, a single spark shot through me, running from my head to my toes. My stomach felt like it was full of butterflies, and my mind seemed to turn off. And then I was kissing him back, my hands going into his soft brown hair. I secured his face to mine, unable, and unwilling, to let him go. I pulled him closer, our bodies flushed together. Everything was heat and passion and sparks. A soft moan sounded from me and he grinned against my lips before pulling back. I looked into his eyes, my breathing come hard. "Wow!" I breathed. "What a first kiss!" Jasper's POV. Our little group sat outside around the fire, laughing into the night. I hadn't been sure how this was going to go, with Dylan. But he seemed content to whatever feud we had behind him, and so was I. If I was being honest, I actually liked the guy. He was pretty funny, and just as sarcastic as I was. He also obviously cared about Violet, and that was a big thing for me. I wanted people around her I could trust, and I knew he would never let anything happen to her if I wasn't around. He'd been transparently honest with me too, telling me how he'd hoped Violet was his mate before he found Brienne. It didn't bug me, he looked happy with her. Brienne I knew I could also trust. She was a sweet, kind of like a baby deer, but she also has a wild side, I was sure. They both seemed to warm up to me as the night went on, and we all got to each other on a friendly level. Part of me hoped Dylan would talk to Garrett, and get him to back off. The other part of me didn't really care however. I was happy with Vi, and if the kiss we shared earlier said anything, she was pretty happy too. All evening, she'd been sneaking peeks at me, holding my hand when she wasn't busy eating or talking. Another little quirk I loved about her, she used her hands to talk, some might say too much, but I thought it was cute. She was very expressive, animated. It took a lot of focus to pay attention to anything other than her. Finally though, Dylan stood and stretched. We should get going. I have my first warrior training session tomorrow and I don't want to be late. Brienne stood with him, but Violet stayed seated. I'll see you guys later. I'll text you tomorrow, Brienne, and we can decide where to go this weekend. She smiled. Sounds good. We'll see you guys later. Thanks, Jasper, for inviting us out. This was fun. No problem. You guys are welcome anytime. They waved as they walked off. Should we walk with them to the border? Violet asked me. Nah. We'd know if anyone was around. And didn't you say your mom sent extra warriors? Yeah. You're right. Shouldn't you be going home too? I asked as evenly as I could. I didn't want her to go, and she surprised me by grinning hugely. Actually, Mom said I don't have a curfew tonight. She leaned back, staring into the fire. I was thinking you and I could hang out some more. If you want. I returned her grin. I'd love that. Want to go for a run? She asked eagerly. I nodded just as excitedly. Oh wait. I promised I'd tell Mom if we were going anywhere. Her eyes glazed over for several minutes. I waited patiently. She blinked, her eyes going back to normal. My mom would feel more comfortable if we ran within the borders. That's fine. We can shift here and head that way. I walked inside, letting her shift in private. When I heard soft yipping outside, I knew she was done. I was barely out the door when Hala was in my face, licking me. I laughed heartily, putting my hand on her snout. Goddess, she really was beautiful. Hey Hala! You ready to run? She jumped back, crouching into a play position. You two have fun, okay? She snorted in response and I took my shirt off. I had a few extra clothes here, so I didn't care about my pants, but I liked that shirt. I tossed it into the cabin before closing the door and shifting myself. Eno stretched his legs before trotting over to his mate. They sniffed each other, giving little licks. I could feel my wolf's thought process and spoke up. Don't even think about it. But she's my mate too. He whined. You can wait until after Violet and I have mated. Keep it in your pants. I don't wear pants though. Eno. Alright, alright. You're no fun at all. He growled lowly, making me snicker. We took off, with me sitting comfortably at the back of my mind. I simply enjoyed the freedom of being in his form while he ran, played, and hunted with Hala. We passed Border Patrol, who nodded at us. I was sure they weren't too far away, but they gave us space to be together, which I appreciated. Only once did I have to reprimand my wolf when Hala stretched, giving him a good view of her backside. He laid down, covering his eyes with his paw, grouching at me. It was after midnight when we returned to the cabin. Violet went around the side of the cabin to shift while I shifted where I had before, quickly going into the house to find pants. She entered the bedroom as I was doing up the zipper, her eyes grazing over my bare chest until they met mine. That was fun. She said. Yeah. I leaned against the dresser. What do you want to do? She pursed her lips, thinking. You have a TV in the living room. Got any movies? Tons. She turned and I followed her out. Flopping down on the sofa, she curled her legs under her. I bent down in front of the TV stand, scanning the DVDs. What's your favorite genre? I asked. Horror. I looked at her. I had more than enough horror movies in here, including some old classics. You're not into chick flicks. Why? Do you want to watch one? She teased. No, thanks. I've sat through my fair share with my mom. I shuddered and she laughed. The rest of the audiobooks will be uploaded in the next episode. Join us on Patreon to listen to more unlimited audiobooks.